Hello. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. We're starting our very exciting new project. It's called Propulsion Labs. It's our attempt to bring more attention to the space of developer tools. And today we're kicking off with the first episode on community building with my amazing speakers. And my name is Victoria. I'm an evil Martian. I'm going to give a quick round of intros to all our speakers today, and we'll dive right into the nitty-gritty questions about community building. So let's start with Sylvia. Sylvia here runs developer relations at StackBlitz. She's a front-end developer, tech writer, educator. She's passionate about making tech accessible and diverse. She's also a co-organizer at React Robins and a community for women and non-binary React devs. Sylvia, a quick word to you. Please introduce yourself.
Well, your introduction was great. Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you and learn from you. I think that's it.
All right. Next up is Ben Arndt. Ben runs developer relations at Teleport. He thrives on helping both enterprise and the open source community via the open core product offering. Ben, a quick word to you.
Great. I think that was a great intro. I'm just really excited to chat today about community. It's always been an important part of Teleport itself, and then also throughout my career, I've worked in multiple communities. So really excited for today's conversation.
Next up, we have Don Goodman-Wilson. He is trained in humanities and computer science. He has a passion for bridging cultures and bringing broader context to contemporary issues. He runs an agency dedicated specifically to developer relations. Don, a quick word to you.
Hi, I'm Don. Thanks for the very kind introduction. I always get very excited around anything involving the professionalization of what it is that we do. So I'm excited to be talking about community with all of y'all today.
Thank you. Finally, we have Andrzej Sydnik. He is the principal front-end engineer at Evil Martians. He is the author of Auto Prefixer, Browser List, PostCSS, and many other amazing open source projects. Andrzej, a quick word to you.
Thank you for kind words. I will try to share my experience of creating and working in the community of PostCSS, but also Wikipedia. I was administrator there and a few meetups in the St. Petersburg.
Okay, perfect. So let's discuss community building. How about we start from a very high level question? What's the value of a community for a developer tool, and how does it help business? Maybe we can start with Don on just this philosophical grand question.
I think the value of community is very straightforward in that it gives you an opportunity to market and grow interest in your developer tool or your platform in a very organic way without relying on traditional marketing techniques, which frequently turn developers off. Right? They trust their peers to make recommendations, and when they're part of a community together, they're much more likely to make and act on those recommendations.
Okay, maybe Sylvia can add a little bit to that, and maybe specifically about StackBlitz and community, how it's helping StackBlitz in its business.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that first I will piggyback off what Don said. There is a huge value in that. In DevTools, our users are developers. That means that they are also oftentimes the decision makers on their teams. That means that their recommendation or their satisfaction can carry a lot of value. So the distance, if you think about it, like the distance between their satisfaction and the scale of adoption is not as long as in other fields, right? So especially in DevTools, I think that adopting this community-driven growth is like definitely just like the right decision. And there's another thing about DevTools. I think that it's very specific to DevTools is that, we often say that our product is by engineers and for engineers. And that actually can lead to massive blind spots because there are only so few people in our company. And sadly, especially smaller companies tend to hire like-minded people. Even if you are trying to hire a diverse crowd, you're, ending up with people who are more or less similar. And because of that, you end up in a sort of a bubble. So if you have a community whose feedback you actually trust, then they can actually provide you with so many insights that otherwise, I don't know, you would learn from Twitter, being tagged somewhere. And so on the one hand, it is, developing something for people who will be using that. On the other hand, also helping your community be extremely happy with your product.
Yeah, it sounds like the community needs to be that safe space where people feel free to genuinely share how they feel about a product, right? And not only about the good parts, but also the bad parts. And you have to balance how, you take that into consideration.
I think sharing is one thing. I will just add, sharing is one thing. The other part is also that they need to feel that what they will tell you will be acted on. So it's not only just creating space for people to just, tell you everything they think about your product, good and bad, but actually also to see how much power they have to execute on these ideas.
Yeah, I like that. Ben, how about you? What do you think is the value of a developer community?
So I think, just to kind of like step back a bit, I think so if we can address this, like the engineers as sort of people like deciding and purchasing things. Let's say 20 years ago, you're sort of prescribed what you had. And I think we're talking as sort of individual people who sort of run communities for our products, but there's also like the wider community. So if you're like a Ruby on Rails developer, that's like a big community. And I think it's interesting how, let's say you have like a cloud provider, there's like a sort of an AWS community, but it's a lot more commercial. And I think the thing is you basically getting together with your peers and saying like, okay, how can I get together with my people in one sort of space, sort of share what's working well, what can be improved, and sort of improve as a community in general. From a dev tool, we run a open source, open core dev tool, and our community is sort of a blend of both. When we first started, we view our like communities as our open source users. We're like, oh, they're like the people who don't pay us. That's our kind of community. Maybe someday they'll go to enterprise. But the reality which had already hit me, we had like our first user conferences. Some of our best advocates are also people who are in both communities. They use our product in their home lab, and they also use Teleport at work. And then it also like really humanizes. It's not like, is this person sort of like an enterprise customer or an open source community user? It's sort of a blend of both. And we sort of use like the orbit model for how people are engaged. And so we just see like, are people being trusted leaders and advocates? That's like our number one thing that we try to do. And we will support a trusted leader and advocate, whether they don't pay us. And then we know that they'll recommend it to their friends and it'll solve their problem. I think ultimately we're just trying to, amplify the voice that we have a problem that sort of solves a solution. And hopefully if people come join our community, we can help support them.
Awesome. So I'll jump right next to the question with you, Ben. What's the right time to start a community? So what do you think is the best, what's the best practice?
I think we chatted about this before the call, and I have friends at Mux. Mux is a video encoding product, which is sort of closed source. And before they actually launched Mux, they noticed that in their space for video encoding, it's a disparate community of people. So you have people who are like video engineers, you have video streamers, but there wasn't one central place in which you could go and sort of argue like, what's the problems with different video codecs? And so they created a space that everyone could get together and be like, oh, like H.426 v AV1, like what's the pros and cons of compression? And they kind of created that community that people could get together and argue. And that sort of influenced some of what they built into sort of Mux to sort of solve those problems. And so they actually built their community before they built their product.
Sylvia, what do you think? Because you're also,
I have a hot take. Prepare yourself. Well, I would say that the right time to start building a community is as soon as you're actually ready to show up in a consistent way. And also, as soon as you are ready to support the community manager. So this is maybe not so much in opposition to what Ben you said, but I think that those two things we oftentimes don't think about. We think that, community, we just say hi and it just grows and it's a happy place. But the thing is that if you're doing the community right, it's going to actually grow. And so you'll be hearing a lot of satisfaction. You also have to manage that. But you will also hear a lot of dissatisfaction. And either can actually be really taxing. So, on the one hand, that means that you need to there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than building a momentum, building a community, building that trust, and then just like disappearing because you have other priorities. This is just like the worst thing you can do for your community and also for your product and for yourself. And so
it's a great answer.
Yeah. There is also, the question of the community manager that oftentimes we just think, oh, this person is so, sparkly and happy, they can manage the community. But then, that is a lot to manage. So there are two things I would say to really consider. But as soon as possible, that would be, the short answer.
Just to expand on this real quick, so you mentioned that this community leader is sparkly, whatever, like a bubbly, nice person. What do you think makes a good community leader? Like, what are those qualities that would keep them, well, happy and sane, for a long time, but also useful in their kind of position?
Yeah, so I would say that the qualities that make a good community leader are actually are actually not what commonly we associate with good community leader, right? So oftentimes we think about the bubbly and sparkly person, but from my experience, the best communities thrive under the leaders who are honest, transparent, and communicate with integrity, and who are also a part of a team that has their back, right? So it's not, oftentimes we are thinking about who should lead the community. And let's say, of course, there are many people with different skill sets, but I would really designate a specific person to lead the community and then maybe tie in different team members so that there's one person who can, be like the rock who provides the rules, but also, delivers good news. And then that person doesn't have to have the whole expertise on everything about the company. They can actually just tag another, team. So yeah, like I would say a good community leader is also a very good diplomat who also understands that it is a long-term commitment and oftentimes needs to explain it to, let's say, the team or the CEO that community is not necessarily measurable. So a lot of diplomacy, honesty, transparency needed.
It sounds like a good community leader also needs to delegate, because you can't really do everything by yourself. Speaking of doing everything by yourself, Andre, let's talk about how do you begin building a community? Let's say if we take post CSS, right? How did it come about? How do you go about building a community? Who should be in charge and things like that?
There's a very interesting case here because we are all talking about the community, like in our internet, like a tool, like an object, which we try to solve our problem. But I see a community in a little different way. Wikipedia showed me it. Like initially, Wikipedia was a project created as a comment platform for the people who writing a real encyclopedia. But the people who join this project, they got a power and, overrule the creator of Wikipedia. The whole Wikipedia was made not by the creator, but by the community. And this is why, I really talking about who should be in charge. My natural answer will be the community, of course, because the community is the subject. For instance, in post CSS, initially I created PostCSS as like a modular SaaS. So it was a completely different view how it evolved right now. And but this was a wrong way of thinking. A lot of people came and say that they don't want to make a project in this way. They want completely different system. And because the PostCSS was completely chaotical project, like without any rulers, without any ways, CSS Next, etc. They start to create their own brands on top of my technology. And it leads me to a completely new way of thinking about the solution. So community could be also not a tool, but a trickster for yourself, for your company, which will open a completely new possibilities for your company. So technically, of course, there should be a person, but which have everything in mind about your community, but it should be not, a leader of community. It should be, as a embassy inside the community.
I like that. In a way, you need to be kind of like a good parent, when you're not projecting your ideas onto other people, right? And instead, you're just like allowing them to flourish in the best way possible. And you as an author, how does it make you feel when you see that community grow? And maybe when it grows beyond your expectations, how does it make you feel?
If it's grow beyond your expectation in modern open source, it's like means that you have not do a lot of stuff because they will do it by themselves. When somebody fork your project and create completely new project, it means that you finally can go rest and don't have this obligation to the community. So it's more in this way. But to be honest, this embassy type community, it brings a lot of warm feelings, because you see not like a workers of, not like a co-workers of you, but you see a friends who share the idea is much bigger than you, and this feeling is very nice, to be honest. But honestly, there is this is idealistic way, but in the reality, there is in post-CSS we have another problem. In some moment, without the strict view of how post-CSS should be used, because every plugin developer have its own view, we ended with the things which it's just an idea, and every person should create their own set of post-CSS plugins. And in the reality, it mostly stopped the post-CSS development, because only this small community, we was people who experimented with the stuff. Most of the people, they just want a one single solution.
Yeah.
So maybe the answer, the real answer is something in between, but we should not forget about the ideal answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of philosophical, right? Don, what do you think is the best practice in creating a community? Who should be leading the community? Just let's expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because here's my spicy take for the evening, which is you can't create community. It's not a thing that you can do. Communities are organic. They're a gathering of people who've come together to solve a problem that they can't solve by themselves. They need help with, and it's something that they can only tackle as a group of people working together. Creating community implies creating a problem for the community to solve, but they're only going to come together to solve that problem if it's in their own interest. So really, you can only facilitate community coming into being, right, by identifying a problem that's not yet solved, that's interesting to people, or identifying groups of people or individuals who are working towards a solution in isolation and bringing them together into the same room, right? So facilitating a community requires already knowing some answers to these kinds of questions, right? And a lot of open source projects begin with, oh, I have this problem, I want to solve it, right? And I feel that other people probably have a similar sort of problem or related problem or a different perspective on this problem. And in virtue of somebody, me perhaps, going out and creating an open source project and trying to start conversations with these people, then more people will come as they identify with that problem, as they identify with the attempts to solve that problem, right? And I think this is a difficulty for a lot of startups that want a community, is they're missing that key step. They think, well, if I put a project on GitHub, or if I open a Discord server, that's my community. But that's missing like that first crucial step of identifying the shared problem that people can get really passionate about. That's providing a platform for community interaction, but that's not the community itself, right?
Yeah.
So first step should not be things like starting a Discord or putting a project on GitHub, but it should be going out and talking with people that you know already, that you feel could serve the seed as a sort of community, and leveraging your existing network. So who should be starting it? It should be somebody who's very clued into the technical or engineering problems that you think you can build a community around, and it should be somebody with sufficient network contacts that they can reach out to them and start the nucleus of that community. That's my take on it, of course, but yeah, that's how I approach this question.
Ben, what do you think about that? How do who should be leading the community?
I mean, I definitely agree with Don. All of his points very relevant. I think actually one interesting thing with sort of our community of users, which is kind of unique, is that we're in a open source security tool, and actually many people don't want to publicly talk about their security problems in like a public domain. And I actually did a couple of events last year following the Chatham House rule. The Chatham House is like an old English club in which the idea is you can go to this venue, you can take the learnings from everyone else, but you can't share who said it. And actually, I found by creating an environment in which people could sort of share openly and not say like, oh, this like large Fortune 500 fintech is doing this. And engineers could very collaborate, and not only just on like our product, also on like all the other problems that they're running into, because there's often these silos, and when people sort of don't get together, they'll sort of like uncover more value. And then, also about like leading, I think we can sort of do something sort of similar. While we do have sort of forums in which people can interact, like it's a mixture of like engineers, our CTO, our CEO is kind of in there answering kind of questions. And so we actually distribute everyone kind of like leading it. We will help facilitate some conversations, but we find it's quicker just for engineers to directly answer, and that also like helps with the feedback loops of like improving our open source project. And like our backlog is all public as well. I think one interesting thing is like while we're an open core company, like open source, we're pretty hostile to pull requests because of the nature of the product. Right, like the tests, security issues, it just is quite hostile. So we often like work together if people do want to put a pull request in, but that's actually one area in which we don't overly facilitate more than like other open source projects.
Okay, thank you. I want to come back to what Don said just previously. You were talking about people sharing the same problem, right? And then they come together and kind of try to resolve it. How do you keep motivating people to come back and do things? How do you make sure they bring value to each other, but also that they're able to solve their problems, with the tool or within this community?
Yeah, so that question brings me back to a point I wanted to raise with the first question, which I think will actually address this question, which is it's one thing to ask what is the value of community to a product, right? But given that a community is a collaborative problem-solving effort, the real question should be like, what value can you bring to a potential community, right, as a product, as a startup? And that value, whatever it is, we could talk about some examples of what that looks like. But that value is what motivates them to continue participating, right? Because if the participants in the community are getting nothing out of it, if they're not seeing any value of themselves, if they're not sharing in the rewards of what the community is building, then they're going to become demotivated super quickly, right? So you need to find something suitable for your community, and it's always going to be fairly bespoke. That that creates value for them, and that will incentivize them to continue participating. So a couple of examples. GitHub, for the longest time, had, and they still have, right? But it was more of a big deal 10 years ago. A fantastic collection of stickers, right? So they had this adorable mascot, Mona Lisa Octocat, right? And they would make all sorts of stickers of her in different costumes, some of them infringing on trademarks and copyrights, but we won't go into that. But they were all fun, right? And the only way to get one of these stickers was to meet somebody who worked from GitHub, which was probably easier than you'd think it would be as a globally distributed workforce. But these stickers imbued a bit of reputation, right, to the bearer of the stickers, because it means, yes, they had met somebody from GitHub, they'd had a conversation with them, and in fact, maybe they found a particularly rare or unusual sticker. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of designs. There used to be a site where you could see all the different designs, and it would be like a checklist to see which ones that you had managed to collect, right? And so in the early days of GitHub's community, the value, the currency that was used to drive that community was stickers, right? This is not a model that's going to work super well today. A lot of people try to copy it. I think stickers are not super valuable in and of themselves, right? But the reputation buff in general, like, is a really good value that you can offer your community. So many open source projects provide this value to their community. The bigger and more popular the open source project is, the more it means to say on your CV, I'm a contributor to this project, because it's going to get you a better job, it's going to get you better pay, it's going to make you look better to your peers, your boss, right? And so that's a huge sort of value that a community can provide. Other examples include financial incentives, right? This is straight up, you can pay your community. Now, I don't recommend that you do that, right? But an example of this actually happening and being fairly successful was when Slack launched their app marketplace, and they wanted to create this third category of applications, right? Desktop apps, mobile apps, and chat apps, right? And so we had a community of chat app developers who were working together to sort of figure out what even is a chat app? What are the best practices for developing them? What are the best practices for the UX? There's so many open questions around this. But we actually started at Slack, we started a small venture capital fund, right? Where we could provide seed funding or very early stage funding to very promising startups building chat applications for the Slack marketplace. And so I don't remember what the sums of numbers involved were, right? But we were able to fund 3 or 4 companies at their earliest stages who had extremely promising ideas that also looked like they really helped Slack's growth take off, right? So, that was a huge incentive, right? We'd all sit together in a room and try to think of the best ideas for apps and bounce them off of each other in an attempt ultimately to build businesses that could tap into this source of funding and ostensibly the kinds of growth and opportunities that they came with building for that platform. It didn't really pan out in the end. We'll just gloss over that part of the story, right? But so applied in the right ways, even money is something that you can use. But ideally, like, maybe something more towards the reputation end of the spectrum is easier for many startups to work with.
Andre, how about open source? How do you motivate people to bring value to each other within the open source realm? And how do you make sure that they don't burn out?
This is, to be honest, 2 different questions. Like, first one, how to bring people, and then how to keep them working on the task. I really like the idea from Don that like community is creating the share problem. Like, this is the main hot take which I will take from this. I hope maybe it will be another one, even better, but still. So I believe that maybe like the best way to keep people inside this feedback loop of the community is to allow them to see their feedback, their impact on, for instance, solving this problem. For instance, if we have like sort of a public list of the issues and people can vote, for these issues. If these people will see that developers solve issues according they talk with CTO, but not according to the votes, no, they will feel that all their action has no result. And for instance, in post-CSS, when somebody create a plugin, it was like I immediately create a tweet in the public post-CSS account. I start to like write a suggestion how to improve this plugin, and people was so happy that somebody saw them, that somebody like try to push the product to the market, helping them like it's really motivate people. But of course, this is only from the stage when they already make the first step, because how to make the first step is a very big and complicated question.
Your activists overcome that barrier to participation, because many people feel intimidated, because when you are doing something in public, in the community, you are very much visible, you are vulnerable, right? How do you help them? Sylvia, maybe you can help us unpack this question. How do you reward your champions? How do you help people overcome this initial barrier to even participate in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it is really important to recognize that even though we are talking about a community, and the community is really different communities. And so you will have people who are very experienced, and then maybe more of newbies, and even like very experienced devs who actually never had, opportunity to work with this specific stack or, in the specific, problem area. And so you want to have people in your community, not necessarily even on your core team, but like just ambassadors, or however you want to call them, who know how to communicate to different audiences, meaning explain different things in a way that doesn't offend the ego of those super advanced, and also doesn't intimidate those who maybe are very new or just new, let's say, to open source, if we are talking about open source. And so first, you really need some kind of like guidelines for those community maintainers on how to shape the community vibe. I will circle back to what Don said about identifying a problem. I really like that. However, I have opinions. So I agree that to build a community, we need to either create a problem or actually identify a problem and bring people together. However, when thinking about community, we should be thinking about running people around the solution. And I know that that's what Don said, but I just want to emphasize that, because you can actually see right now in web dev kind of space, there are some communities that were rallied around the problem and continue to be in the problem, and that has a very different vibe. And so if you're rallying people around the emotion of being angry or frustrated, that is going to be the emotion of your community. If you're rallying people around problem solving and coming together to build something better, that already kind of shifts the mindset, right? And so I would say, first, you need some kind of communication like ground rules. Then just it's about problem solving, again, what Don said. So like you need to figure out what people need and what they lack. Right. So for example, they need visibility. Okay, be generous with shout outs. Give them possibility to be, to share the spotlight. Do they need to grow an opportunity to grow? Assign tasks, and maybe assign a buddy or kind of like accountability buddy even, so that they can actually have the environment in which they can contribute in a positive way. And then also think about like maybe rewarding different types of contributions, because oftentimes in tech, it's like, oh, engineers are so great, then there are docs. That is such a problem, because oftentimes people who start with the documentation then can actually move on to something, engineering. And maybe actually we don't need that at all. Maybe great documentation is the problem of a given framework. And so I want to, in this space, I want to give in this point, I want to give a huge shout out to Sarah Reinsberger from Astro team, who is excellent excellent with building community around astrodocs and just holding the space and giving the spotlight to her community. Literally, I just go to Astro Discord just to chill, just to hang out because the guys are so nice. And like they have a whole system of rewards and of helping people just really excel. And then there is another community that is also really excellent. That's VIT community, where people just feel a part of it immediately. It's the whole setup of their Discord, of their public channels. And here, the shout out goes to Matthias Cappelletto, also known as Patak. So I just really want you, like everyone who is watching that, to, if you're looking for inspiration, I mean, you can look at us, but then you can also just go to those two Discords or like just talk to those two people and you will learn so much.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like people want to feel good about themselves, right? And they just want to feel good. So it makes sense to create a community where people want to come back, obviously you don't want it to be a toxic community. You want it to be a very kind of nice place to be. Yeah, I think it's just like a general rule of thumb there. Ben, do you have any best practices and kind of rewarding champions and just motivating people to, to stay active?
Yeah, I think in our space, especially, we're sort of in the same realm as like cloud native kind of infrastructure. And I think one thing that people often, we think about open source communities, people to the point of it's not just like commits, often it's just like running the software. And actually, like, let's say take the Kubernetes community, a lot of the Kubernetes community is more just about like taking this software, running and building your applications with all of these open source components and sharing like, oh, what's the value you can get from that? For us, we do the same thing. Like for community users, we actually have like an interesting to step back a bit, like we're very privacy centric. And so we actually don't have very much information about like when people install Teleport, we don't know it unless it's self-reported. So like, how can people self-report in a developer specific way? And so when you install Teleport on the terminal, it outputs like a curl command. And then you like curl us a message and we like send people like a swag package. And so this is like one of the post install rewards. They can give us like their use case. And this has been like a lightweight way in which people have sort of opted into giving us a little bit of information. We send them some swag. We sort of follow up for our survey. And I think the incentives point is an interesting aspect of Dom. Like we do lots of sort of live streams and things. And I think there's definitely like a cohort of people who will join a community just for like the t-shirt or the swag. We see that a lot. And we always try to, start off with the lowest value item that we have, but you still have to kind of like earn it. And so like, show us you've deployed a cluster or show us that you have this thing before you can sort of earn those rewards.
Do people like collect them? Like, do you have like a teleport collection?
We do have a collection and some of them are also limited edition. We've got a plushie made.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's the next version of stickers.
Yeah,
the plushie is great. But yes, the logistics of sending swag around the world is also like super complicated as well.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like Andrea's just, like if people are advocates, like send a tweet, do something that doesn't necessarily require always shipping stuff around the world. And also, trying to reduce waste as well. I think it can be a pretty wasteful endeavor.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, just a quick side note. We have this tradition at Evil Martians. We do pins every year. So for New Year's, we get like a little New Year's package, and it's like a really nice card and a really cute pin. So yes, we're growing the collection. One is like a Statue of Liberty, and the other one is something else. So and every year it's growing. So the more years you spend on Mars, the more you get them. So I'm growing my blazer collection, so I can show them off. Okay, Don, do you have any advice, any practical advice on motivating, rewarding champions?
So yes, I think broadly speaking, there's this adage among startups, right, or among companies broadly, that the culture of a company is set by the actions of its leadership, right? Not their words. And it's the same thing within a community, right? So if you are very thoughtful and very deliberate in the ways that you interact with the community, that can already be a lot to incentivize participation in the widest sense. So I used to run an online community ages and ages ago for model trains, and we had some very toxic members in this community, and me and the other moderators immediately jumped in, handled these toxic moments, right? Took the necessary steps, but mostly we were very public about this, right? So that other members could see this sort of behavior is not cool. We're not going to tolerate it. And what we saw in the wake of that was rapid growth in participation, right? Because then people saw that they felt safe participating and sharing within this community. That's a huge incentive, right? They're just showing that you care, and that you care enough to set an appropriate and inclusive tone for everybody else.
Do you feel like it's possible to do in a mature community? Eliminate toxicity, like when a community is already a little
bit... Second hot take. No, I think this is something you have to start really, really early. And the more mature the community is, the more the culture is set, right? And the more resistant that they're going to be to change, even small changes to that are not going to be super well received. I think you can do it, really, truly. I mean, knows is a strong word. Yes, you can do it, but it's gonna take time. It's gonna take perseverance. It's gonna take a lot of intervention and a lot of stomach for losing chunks of your community in the process, right? But losing those chunks of your community, I mean, it's probably the most toxic elements that you're losing in the process. Maybe it's not the end of the world, but it feels bad to see the number go down instead of up, right? Even if it will eventually start to go up later. So I think it's very, very difficult and much easier to just do this do this right from the beginning.
Yeah, and it sounds like there is that tough transition period when you're losing like old toxic, elements and gaining new ones, and it's still kind of like this weird space when you don't have the critical mass. The culture is kind of transitioning into something new. Let's come back to our question that I put aside. So let's start with Sylvia. Let's talk about helping people not burn out, and just the question of burning out as an activist in a community. Let's unpack this topic. Go. There you go.
Well, is this going to be a therapy session now? No, I'm kidding.
A little bit, just a little.
No, I'm just joking. I think that it's really important to talk about burnout with your community, leader, manager, activist very soon. And just to, oftentimes people don't even, especially in those public facing roles, and especially in those like service roles, they don't even know what burnout is. Like, they know intellectually, but they are not taught to recognize that in themselves. And so I think it's really important to say that spotting your early signs of burnout is a part of your job, and then you have to just take a step back. So I think that it's so of course, like, it's a work with the person, like their self-awareness, but I'm not saying that they have to do all the job, right? Because they exist in an environment and in a system. And so it's really important to never expect them to communicate after work hours, let's say, if this is a paid opportunity, because this job already comes with so many like expectations from the outside and you are oftentimes made feel like that you are failing if you are not responding immediately, right? So creating an opportunity for the community leaders to just not participate. Another thing is having their back and, just being ready to step in, because there are different situations. Now, I'm not only talking about like their personal life, but like in general in community, a lot can happen. And we can't expect every single person to be able to be equipped to handle every single situation at every single time, right? So sometimes it is really important to create this mutual rapport. Is that how you say, support between the community leader and, like, let's say the core team, so that they don't see those moments when they are unable to step in as their failures, that they are rewarded, for setting boundaries, for example. And then, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but sadly, this is not something I see in the communities, is, not expecting community leaders to communicate with people who make them uncomfortable, who are maybe toxic, abusive, who are lacking self-awareness, or who are just really frustrating and draining. Like, we are all just people. And so different things, trigger different things in us, right? And so even if it's something trivial, there is a reason why, the specific person finds it really challenging to, tackle. And so a certain situation. So yeah, like, just being ready to providing the support system for the community leaders to be able to do their job. That's it. I would say.
Thank you. It's interesting. I mean, safety is kind of like our number one priority, right? So, I mean, safety has to be an important thing in the community, and sometimes it's something that takes time to uncover, and obviously equipped, experienced community leaders kind of are able to identify maybe those signs a little bit earlier. How about Andrei, for example, your case? Like, first of all, how do you deal with toxicity in a community, right? And how do you prevent people from burning out, or maybe yourself from burning out, in maintaining like many big projects in the open source?
Posti says there is no big problem with how people communicate, because unfortunately or luckily, most of our community members don't write a message to each other. They just write the plugins. And so this is how we solve the problem. But it was this whole huge problem in Wikipedia, and we still doesn't know the real answer, because because Wikipedia become a real big political engagement problem. There was some people who try to start to manipulate the rules, and it will become very dangerous. But like, it's completely different topic. But talking about the burnout out in open source, especially in open source, we are missing two different terms. Like, in our work, we have a burnt out because we work too much. But in open source, it's completely different system, and it should be named in different way. In reality, at least what I feel, and what many other maintainers which I spoke feel, is not like working too much, but have lack of the feedback. So initially, in most of the open source project, the maintainers was some sort of the village doctor, which do the work, but the whole village gives them a lot of feedback, not only in the way of money, but sometimes in the way of respect, sometimes in personal communication, sometimes in public space, like opportunity to change people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of open source projects start in this way, and people feel the feedback, and they was completely okay to continue work in this way, to work many hours, but have something in return. But right now, the main problem is that our ecosystem, like the whole Silicon Valley, it use open source as a free labor market rather than people. And the main problem is that nobody really want to pay back, like the real flow of donation in any way, not only in the money, but especially in the money, because we can count it. It's so small that even the biggest projects, the most visible one, which takes a lot of money, have no enough money compared to the general developer in this team.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes not only from the money, but it goes also to the any warm communication. If you're a maintainer, you will have only about one or two nice, warm, kind communication with you over the months, versus 4 or 5 very rage people who have some problems with your project. And same with public visibility. Like we mostly on our conference, sorry for mentioning it, but we have mostly a DevRels, not maintainers. And so like they also cut the way to make a like to have public space. And the third problem, which like even increase these problems, is that the all resources are going to the only top of the ecosystem, top of the pipeline, because like we have, for instance, in Google, they have a very nice system when like developers could put some open source project to the list. And if this project will be good, they will like will be donated. But the main problem, developers should know about this project, and they will know only about the projects, for instance, in their package JSON. And as a result, nobody knows about the projects like in one step ahead in dependency tree. And this is the last problem is completely on the GitHub and NPM side, because they don't provide us a tool. Like for instance, like a lot of developers asking for the subscription model. When you like donate some amount of money and they spread according to the usage or something. The mass is not important. The most important that it should be donated to every part of the dependency tree. I think that these three solutions will like improve the problem with maintenance burnout, because right now, to be honest, about 80% of the open source maintainers doesn't want to do their job, and they do it only because they was forced to do because of the society and responsibilities.
It also feels like when the community is kind of orchestrated well, it's a little bit easier to reward maintainers, not maybe in monetary ways, but, as kind words. Like the more kind of like if you provide the safe space and the stage for people to talk about their achievements and their kind of contributions, I think it's a little bit easier to reward them, right? As you said, PostCSS maintainers speak plugins, maybe it would be nice for them to have a space where they can speak words, and that way be rewarded. Let's talk about a nicer topic. Let's talk about major releases. How do you prepare to major releases as a person who is leading DevRel for a big company? Ben, let's start with you. What do you do?
That's great. Well, I have a major release going tomorrow at 9 a.m. So this is top of mind.
Tell us what you're going to do. What's your checklist?
So one interesting thing, especially being like an open core company, is what the second you release it on GitHub, like everyone knows the cat's kind of out the bag. And our not only is our releases public, our like test plan is public, so people can follow along like our alphas. But we actually, when we do our GitHub release, we do what we call like a marketing release about a month afterwards. And that's not often enough to make like at least a point release. As with all software, any major release is an opportunity to introduce breaking changes. It's kind of like a feature and a bug of releasing software. And so people who are very active in our communities will take us and give us kind of feedback during that period of time. But also I make, we have blog posts, we have videos, we have documentation to update, all of the other machinery to fully support the release. And we found about like a month afterwards, it's just enough time. And then, by the time our like sales team or people kind of reach out, the software is pretty stable. I'd say one sort of interesting thing about our software is we find that it does take a while for people to upgrade anyway. And so having the immediate release version, like there's always some part of the community who wants like nightly builds, but I think actually a lot of businesses want like stable software. And any new software that you release always introduces like new bugs as well. And so that's kind of how we support our product releases. So a mixture of, I guess, like traditional product marketing, other activities. We have like social updates, but we have like our community Slack and just generally communicate and get more feedback.
Okay. And Sylvia, how about you? You just had a really successful release not so long ago, and today you guys are launched on Product Hunt, right?
Oh, yes, that's true. Please upvote. I will drop the link in the chat now.
Yes. Please do.
Well, yes, we just had a major release. So actually, maybe I should also say what StackBlitz does.
Yes, please
So
do.
StackBlitz allows basically running Node.js inside the browser. So we have this technology called web containers, which we used so far for like a very simple IDE for reproductions or like demos. And then we built a bigger one, which is kind of a copy of VS Code, but can run Node.js inside the browser. And then now recently, literally just like 2 weeks ago, we have released Web Container API. So now you all can actually just take it and build your own things. Please do and tell me about it so I can celebrate you all. But actually, so this API is such a lovely story for me because it started as so the whole product development was just as I would dream it. Namely, we started it with a community member. So actually, SvelteKit, Rich Harris reached out to us. They wanted to build a tutorial for SvelteKit that would be running inside the browser. And so we developed the API in very close collaboration with them. And then once that was announced in June, I believe, at a conference, we didn't yet go full public. We then started onboarding different projects, and working very closely with them because, to gather more feedback, to see what they are, confused about, what features they would need to build, different use cases. And then, and very slowly we were also just like improving the API. I was literally initially we were just working. There were just 2 people working on that. So myself, kind of liaisoning this relationship with the community, and an engineer, my colleague Roberto Vidal, who was acting on that feedback. So it was a really comfortable, amazing collaboration. Also, gave us plenty opportunity to be really close to different projects, different community members, and build this for them. And so then we took all the questions that they had, all the points where they were, stuck, and that informed the development of our examples, of our docs, of, all the content on our platform. And so you can check it out. It's webcontainers.io. And then we only released publicly. And because also before releasing, we circled back to all those community members that we asked for feedback or test runs, and got more feedback to act on. We actually postponed our release a few days to actually be even better prepared and to really validate the feedback we got. And then, because of the fact that the community was so involved, but also because this is a tool that many people were really impatient about, it's the release was just like massive. We weren't prepared for such success. The very tweet was read by 500,000 people. Wow. And then even now, even though it's already 2 weeks after the release, on a weekly basis, I actually just checked for something else, but on a weekly basis, people spend 18,000 minutes reading our docs, which means like 12 days. So that is, that means there are quite a few people visiting, but they are actually staying longer because, the docs were designed very closely with the community. And so maybe I didn't emphasize that enough, but because the community was very involved in the development, they also were very generous in sharing, the support on Twitter, on, Slack, and so on and so forth. We already have quite a few really excellent projects built on that, and we are about to release a community page with a gallery of different inspirations from the community. And some examples are just like I would never think about that, like low-code solutions, AI, or like even CLI chess game, for example. So I'm so excited to see, what will come to us next and how else we can support the community. We already have quite a few ideas. So this was such a happy story for us because, from the very beginning to the very end, we were very close to the community, and we didn't rush the process. We just really took time to make sure that everyone's feedback is acknowledged, and that we are prepared for, you know, just really like serving the community with this tool. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy about this. I don't know if you can...
Yeah, it makes me happy to listen to you be so happy about the release. I think it's such like it's such a holistic you know, like process, and it's like it just feels good. I know that it feels good, like just by looking at you. And I congratulate you on the successful release. And Ben, I hope your release goes super well as well. Where, you
If
know,
I take like a tenth of it, I'll be happy.
wishing you all the success there. Andrea,
One
do you want
interesting
to...
thing, actually,
Yeah,
so
yeah, go.
this is a pretty common strategy. You know, like you have the corporate organization StackBlix, but you have webcontainers.io. Maybe it's a good time to talk about like how, as a company, you sort of create something else that's kind of separate outside of your company to sort of support community. Wonder if you could touch on the benefits of that.
Sorry, could you repeat?
So you have, I guess you launched under webcontainers.io, which is sort of a separate kind of project. Could you talk about like some of the benefits of sort of creating a different sort of microsite for that release?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, you know, web containers as a product is, or actually as a tool, I like to talk about it as a tool because it's free. Our free tier is so generous, and also it is free entirely for open source. And so that's why I'm making the distinction. It's not just like, you know, some kind of marketing speak, but I actually do believe that it's more of a tool than just like a product. So web containers is just, it's such a massive advancement in web development, in what is actually possible. And also our mission behind the web containers is we are really serious about making tech more accessible, making web development more equitable, because, you know, web containers, it runs entirely in the browser. Because of that, you don't need a good internet connection. You also don't need like super amazing laptop. So because of that, you see like there's a lot that comes to web containers when we are thinking about it. Because of that, we decided to have a separate space which we can grow. Now our just StackBlitz offering is we have so many different pathways for people to be engaged with StackBlitz. So we have CodeFlow, which is our full-fledged IDE. We have the small IDE for like demos, right, and bug reproductions. We have Web Publisher, which is this is like a tool for very easy docs editing. And I use the word easy really carefully, but this is made for people who are in a rush or maybe not really technical, right? And so our doc site was already kind of bloated. Because of that, we thought that by moving web containers to its own space, that would be just easier for people to find the information, to just quickly get what they need. This wasn't so much of a marketing strategy, and if it was, please tell me so then I can brag about it. It's really because it's much easier to manage content that is, I'm a documentarian first and foremost, so it's much easier to manage content that is kind of contained, and it is much easier to direct your users to specific points, you know, on a website. So in a way, it's all about just taking the perspective of a user who is overwhelmed, who doesn't like to learn new things. And because of that, if there is like a little corner specifically designed for them, it's just more friendly and just easier to manage. I don't know if that provides any clarity.
No, I think that's a nice answer.
Okay, great. Yes.
Yeah, actually, we write documentation. The well done documentation is extremely important for DevTools, and we will do a whole separate episode on documentation. Maybe Sylvia can revisit that one. But documentation is definitely something that needs to be unpacked to a greater extent, because I think there's a lot to be said about that. But let's come back to the releases a little bit, and Andrea, maybe you can tell us about your major releases, because I feel like you've had a few.
I hope you forgot about me, because like I am the worst person to ask about this question. Like I released PostCSS 8 about 2 years ago, even more, like it's about 3, and I was able to move from the United States to the Spain during this time, like changed a lot of my life, but still most of the plugins still use PostCSS 7, and this is the main release which people download from the NPM. So yep, it was not so good project, so good release. But at least the few problems which we avoided is that like don't came with release from nowhere. Like prepare your community from months ahead and like give them information about how it will be and give them a way to test their environment in like your new shiny software, which will not work in their environment because it's completely different. And of course, provide immigration guide. At least this is most important one for the tools like PostCSS when it's API and people need to change their code to be able to work with this tool. And the interesting insight which we found, like during this migration, PostCSS is some sort of the tool in the middle when you need some sort of the runner, Webpack or like another tool which compiles your website and plugins. And so first we need to rewrite whole set of the plugins. And also we need to rewrite the Webpack to release a new version of Webpack, etc. And we, like for the second problem, we started the whole page with the current status of each runner and like what issue was opened about this problem, what you should use, how you should migrate, and it's helped a lot for the users, at least for some of them to migrate. I hope they finally PostCSS 7 will have less users than PostCSS 8.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like people really get accustomed to software, you know, to solutions, the way they're done in a certain way. And I remember, I mean, when Instagram updated, do you guys remember that? Like for me, it was major stress. Like I'm just like not big on those changes, even though now I don't even realize that it has changed, right? But I know that people have resistance to new things, and it's very important to ease them into something new, especially when it's something that has to do with the core functionality of their product, right? When it hugely like impacts their day-to-day life. Let's talk about some other common pitfalls that maybe products do in terms of communities. Don, let's start with you. Like what are some common pitfalls that you see in businesses, maybe particularly in dev tools, and what do you think is important to keep in mind to avoid those kind of situations?
Common pitfalls. So I think we've actually touched on a lot of them already, right? Like not engaging with your community or failing to follow through with your community, right? So setting up a Discord, inviting people to come in and chat, and maybe some of them do, and then crickets, right? Because you and your team don't have the time to properly engage with the community and keep the conversation going, keep people feeling like there's something there, right? It's really difficult. It's really time consuming. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of effort that goes into it, and just how valuable a community manager can be for these sorts of things. I think the other major pitfall that I see, and this is a completely different thing whatsoever, is confusing community and audience, right? So an audience is a target for a one-to-many unidirectional communications platform, right? So advertising, you advertise to an audience. There's no chance for them really to talk back. They just see the poster, the TV ad, right? Probably not for the products we're talking about, right? But in general. And so I think a lot of people mistake a community for an email list that they can send a blast out to, or people who are just going to automatically like everything you post on Twitter. And the result is unidirectional communication that centers the product, the company, right? As opposed to treating your community as a community. And treating yourself as a part of that community and sending out communications that are not about you, that are about the community, that are about the people in it, that are lifting them up, and talking about the things that they're doing, or attempting to engage with them on their terms, right? And so that requires shifting a lot of thinking away from more traditional marketing as a way of gathering leads to shift over to the sales team, and thinking more about how do I behave as a welcome participant? How do I not make this about me and my product and my business? How do I make it about the people that I want to reach out to and embrace? And I think that's for many people very non-obvious mental shift to make, but you have to make it. And you have to make it like early on to succeed. Yeah. So those I think are the off the top of my head the two things I see the most that are easy fixes, I think, but require mental shift.
Yeah. For sure. Tech marketing is also something that we will be unpacking as a separate episode of this roundtable, because I feel like many companies abuse emails. Like emails are so it's so outdated. Like, come on. Like I'm muted like all my emails, I'm not about that life. But
Well, let me just say, like, if the name of the product is not in the sender or the subject line, nobody knows who this email is from and why it's relevant or important. I get so many emails from startups like this from John. We're changing our terms of service. You should be excited. Like, is it spam? Sorry, but I had to mention that because I get so many emails.
Yeah, I feel like we're in the new ethics, the new era in tech marketing, and it's definitely something that's changing a lot, and it's becoming more human. So I think, that's definitely worth like a separate discussion. Ben, how about you? Do you have anything to add? Any common pitfalls that you see, or maybe have experienced yourself in products?
At least for us, I think our first common pitfall was we saw, like, if you go to our website, there's like a page, it's like download Teleport. Do you want community edition or enterprise? And I think the pitfall we made was like, oh, anyone who goes left, put them into like the Slack room, never reply to their GitHub tickets. Like, we don't care about them. As a business, we only want the people on the right. And obviously, this is a very short-sighted view of what your community is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I touched on this earlier, like some of our best community advocates who have the most interesting use cases, they'll create there's like SE Linux for like locking down Linux machines. And we're like, oh, this guy works this Fortune 500 fintech company. He's using SE Linux. Are they using it at their organization? He's like, no, I just like a really strong, secure home lab and I like tinkering with it. Which I don't know why anyone would want to set up like SE Linux in their home lab, but people are keen advocates. And so I think the way in which we sort of view this discussion and as we think about moving forwards is because our issues are all open and public, both for enterprise and community users, you can, like, I think another risk is like try to decloak people. We generally don't like decloak people. We sort of respect their privacy as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about like, in a similar thing, Andre, like people upvoting and seeing like what has the most sort of likes into sort of our review cycle, and just taking like all of our community feedback, whether it's in like our Slack or our GitHub issues, and thinking about like, okay, what's the problem that all these people are sort of encountering? The answer to the problem isn't necessarily the reply to the ticket,
Mm-hmm.
but there might be another problem that we solve.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which we became more transparent about our decision making about solving their problems is our design documents are also in GitHub. And so we can say like, hey, we're not going to fix this problem, but look at this like RFD. You can see how about we're going to solve this problem in a different way that will sort of solve your problems. And so I think that's kind of how we sort of close that loop of sort of open source kind of feedback and engineering design development, the sort of we are still building like a robust product and also solving the business problems. So I think that's another risk of like open core products. Like I think our backlog's like 2,000 issues. If we were to like solve every 2,000 issues, we would end out with like like the Homer Simpson card that he designs himself. And so you don't want to build that either.
That's hilarious. All right. So we are Sylvia, let's talk about bad things and then we'll end on a good note. We'll talk about something nice. So tell us about common pitfalls, or what you believe common pitfalls are. We already touched a little bit on the Discord, and crickets. Maybe you can just tell us some other common pitfalls that you see that happen, or maybe you have experienced yourself.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, so I really believe in that how we talk to our community, that we are shaping the community, right? So what I see, what is my pet peeve in communication and in discourse in general, is this whole like winning losing discourse, or like superiority discourse. Like basically, I really see that the communities that the leaders who are, subscribing to this kind of framing of their product or of their community, actually have communities that are, like not necessarily as friendly as they could be. And it even goes down to just like, I don't want anyone on our Discord to be comparing, I mean, meritorical comparison between like Stackblitz and competition, sure, but just like saying, oh, Stackblitz rocks and that solution, some kind of horrible speech. I don't want that. Like, we don't need that. So if you're trying to build your whole like community around the idea that this is the winning team, I can take a bet that sooner or later the people who were subscribing to that, will also be really disappointed and very loud, because then they are not subscribing to the idea of your community, they are subscribing to the idea of winning. And so the moment you are, struggling, you will not have their support necessarily, right? The other thing is also like kind of like connected to, like, if we view community through rankings, then we are more prone to rewarding people who are singing praises. And of course, it's nice. I mean, like, we all like to hear nice things. But I actually really appreciate also folks who, just like always have something to say that is like not perfect, who are just like, I don't know, we have a major release and everyone is happy, and there's this person, yeah, but have you seen that button? I mean, like, it's not rounded, is it? You know what I mean? I love that. Bring it to me. Like, tell me all feedback, positive, negative. I will cherish it together. I mean, like, the same way. It's because where I'm coming from the idea of that we are really creating something meaningful. And so if this is how you relate to people, and I mean, if you're not doing that out of malice, but this is your contribution, and I really value that. And if you all think like, oh, I'm gonna challenge you, please do. I'm very patient. But yeah, I think that it is really important to not equate criticism, as a negative trait of a person. Like, just reframe it in your head and just view it as their contribution, their, well-meaning gift for you. And then you can decide what you will do with this gift. And then the last thing, which is, many communities, if not majority, are built by men. And in the design, many problems are not even like accounted for. I can't tell you the number of times where a very, very mellow blog post on dev triggered DMs, really vile DMs, or like comments on every single tweet that I made from like dudes. And so now the dev community has an excellent way of dealing with this kind of stuff, but that's not the case for many Discords. And so I would say, hey, make sure that your team is diverse, and not only women, but just generally diverse, because even if you think you're open-minded, there are things you cannot think about. And so, yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Go on.
For people who are watching and listening, whatever you do, for the love of God, do not use Slack for your discussion platform. Please, it may seem like a very good idea. It may seem like an excellent idea, but you are wrong. There are no moderation tools. There's so many design that will never be removed because they're suited to a very, very different use case than running a public community. It's completely unsuitable if you want to have a diverse community. Don't do it, please.
What is the best tool for the community?
I don't know if there's a best tool. Discord at least does have moderation tools and does have ways of cutting off a number of common harassment vectors. So I generally recommend Discord over over Slack for that reason.
Okay. Thank you.
I never thought about that. This is such a good insight. I find Discord really overwhelming, but now actually you changed my mind. You should, tag the Discord community folks and just ask for some, I don't know, sponsorship.
Just a collection sticker would do,
Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Sylvia because I think I got my biggest takeaway just from your speech right now. I love the idea that when people are criticizing you, it's their way of connecting. I never thought about it that way, So I'm very sensitive to criticism, but I think I'm gonna change, my mind because this is, thank you. This is something I've learned today. So, and that made me really happy.
I have an analogy to go with that. So I'm also very sensitive, and so the way I reframed this, handling, not necessarily criticism, but even just not enthusiasm, is by just thinking about it as this is, let's say, a gift. Let's say your aunt made a jumper for you, and it's really ugly and really uncomfortable. And so, but this is a gift. And so you can accept it and, recognize her effort, but then you can decide what you're going to do with that sweater or jumper, right? So you can shove it into the cupboard or wherever you keep your jumpers, you can wear it. You can also just, it can disappear. But you can recognize the effort and the intention and then decide what you're going to do with that.
I like that. Thank you. So we are about to end this lovely conversation. Let's end with a good note. How about each of you shares a really nice, lovely story that has to do with the community? Let's start with Sylvia, and then I'll direct it from there.
Maybe we start with someone else because I've been speaking and just I'm already tired of my voice for a second. So let's cleanse the palate and then we can get back to me.
Okay. Don, do you want to start?
Okay, I guess this is a good story. Maybe it's a good story. It's a fun story anyway of a community member doing something great. So at Slack, when I was working there, the API was used both for the product and for public usage. And there were some private APIs as well, but all the public APIs have been developed for internal use initially, right? And it turns out that some of our community were experiencing regular 500 errors on the API that we weren't detecting on our end because the volume of those errors was so low, it was basically just noise, right? Because we're looking at all usage of the API, which is mostly the clients, right? Like the Slack clients. And so we had no notion that something was wrong. And so one of our community members built a tool that would alert him, wake him up if need be in the middle of the night when they were seeing a batch of 500 errors. And this tool was actually ultimately really useful for the community and really useful for tracking down the problem because then I would get an email or a DM, right, very urgent, like it's happening right now, the 500 errors. Tell your ops team to do something about this or go figure out what's happening. And the stat was actually really, really useful for ultimately finding a fairly serious but extremely rare bug that was only being triggered by certain ways of using our API that were way more common for apps than happen in the client. So it had a really, really nice ending to it.
Wow. That's like a nice jumper gift, Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I have a great one. I know this is terrible. I did pitch Teleport since I haven't really described what Teleport is, and I think it will be a good story and why this is a good story. So Teleport is a tool that people use for accessing their infrastructure. It can be their servers, their Kubernetes clusters, their databases. And often what you see is, organizations grow, there's a whole bunch of engineers, they're joining like crazy. And how do you provide access with short-lived credentials that's very secure? But we also have our open source edition. And I think I was chatting to one of our community users, who's been a long-time user of Teleport, and he uses it in his home lab to share a CSGO server with his brother who's in another country, and they like get on it and they debug it. And he has like a few other things that he sort of debugs. And we were talking through some of the product capabilities, and we have session recording. So when you go into a session, it records everything that you did. And often we pitch this as sort of, it's for security compliance, it's for like the CISO. But he's like, oh, I love this product. It's like my journal. And he's like, I now know what I did like last Wednesday on my server. I can go back and I'd be like, okay, I can like remember this. And I think Silver kind of mentioned this, the ways in which people take sort of open source free products opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that you wouldn't necessarily know. And I think also having that feedback loop and be like, okay, maybe there's more that we can break out. Like maybe there's a noting and journaling product that we could launch as a commercial product, or maybe it's just the way in which we talk about this product feature that provides like more value to our people.
Yeah, that's a great one. It's like an episode of Black Mirror, you know, when people are just using like different cybersecurity tools to just journal. Andre, how about you? Tell us a lovely story about you and your community.
When PostSS was very small, it was about, I don't know, 60 plugins or something. So like very, for very small amount of the people. I decided to write a personal card to every plugin developers. I collect the emails, got about the 10 mail addresses, wrote it, and it like, when your project is very small, you don't really believe that all these people who do something on top of your tool is real people. You think that maybe it's like, some sort of joke of your colleagues, etc. But when you're writing these emails to a very different part of the world, you understand that this is real people, because sometimes, in some countries, there is no mail addresses, like there is no numbers on the houses. So you like just explain how to find the house on the card. But on the next year, it was a very fast growth, and we have about 400 plugins, and so it leads about 100 cards. And it took me about a week to write every card. But no, it still was amazing experience. I was definitely happy as well, because another people as well will see that their plugin is not some project, some code on the GitHub. They will feel that this is something real, that there is people who really love them for their project. And it was very fun. To be honest, I stopped to do it because it was too hard to write 100 emails.
It would be nice to create like a Twitter thread with all your postcards that you have sent, from different people. Sylvia, yeah, do you want to add something?
Yeah, definitely. All these stories are so lovely. Well, because Andre mentioned share the story of like a macro perspective, maybe I will share a story of micro perspective. So a few months ago, there was a person who submitted a typo edit to our docs. And as I say, that was also that was also right after we adopted Web Publisher for the docs editing. That's important because, as I said, the Web Publisher, it is a tool that was designed for people who are maybe not that technical, or like, who maybe are not really comfortable with the whole cloning and running dependencies flow. Mm-hmm. And so I see a PR from, just a typo edit from a person. So I respond to that. Of course, I merge and I thank the person. And then, a week later, I see 3 PRs from the same person with more advanced kind of either, restructuring or maybe, I don't know, some kind of bug fixes. 2 of them were from the Web Publisher, and 1 was from our full-blown IDE. And so, of course, I also merged that. In one of them, we actually had a conversation. Afterwards, I get a message on Discord from this person, and they thank me because this was actually their first contribution ever to open source. And so now they feel more brave and so on and so forth. And now I actually just saw that they published literally today. They published a blog post about their experience with open source beyond StackBlitz. So now they are actually contributing to different frameworks, and now they are very active in one of them. So this is like really a happy story on how if you are just helping people. I don't know, if you're just nice, people grow, and they share also this growth with you. They take you on a little journey. So
yeah, that's very heartwarming. I think this is a great note to end at. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, because this is the first experience for me of sorts, and this went beyond my expectations. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being so great, insightful. There is so much to learn from this conversation. I have personally learned from this conversation. So thank you very much. And this video will be available online, so people will be able to go back and watch it if they want to feel inspired, or, maybe they'll commit a PR after that. We'll see. So thank you guys. Have a great day. And we'll see you in the next episode, which will happen on April 13th. It's going to be dedicated to tech marketing, and it's going to feature Supabase, Fly.io, Netlify, and Evil Martians. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.
thank you
Nice.
so much for
Victoria.
Thank you.
your patience and for you all.